Welcome back as always. Now, every single year, I ask the same question to my students, and every single year I get the same answer. Are you good at arguing? Now, 99% of you kids think, yes, Mr. Hunsinger, I am very, very good at arguing. Now, today's lesson is all about arguing. How good are you at convincing people something? So today's topic, the Song Dynasty, it is our third dynasty so far. We've covered the Sui Dynasty, then they collapsed, and then we talked about the Tang Dynasty with the two leaders. Well, I don't want to spoil the surprise for you kids who have not talked about the Tang Dynasty yet. Now, our third dynasty is called the Song Dynasty. Now, this dynasty is famous for their inventions. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be looking at which Chinese invention had the greatest impact on the world. So really quick about the fall of the Tang. Now the Tang Dynasty in the mid-700s started losing control of these things called the Silk Roads. Now the Silk Roads were this system of trade networks. So if you lose control of trade, you lose money. Now if you lose money, it's really hard to lead a successful country. Now, the Abbasid Caliphate, we've actually talked about these guys. They were Muslims of the Middle East. They took control of the Silk Roads, and the Tang Dynasty started to collapse a little bit. Then, a few years later, this Sogdian general, now the Sogdians were a people of Central Asia yet again. His name was An Lushan. What he did is he revolted against the Tang, and the Tang came crashing down by the year 907. But worry not. About 50 years later, a military general took power and formed a new dynasty. Now, this dynasty, the Song Dynasty, is the strongest dynasty we have looked at so far. In fact, they were the strongest government in the world at the time and made a ton of intellectual and technological inventions, which is what we are going to be looking at today. So what is your goal? Today's goal is you must thoughtfully argue and prove why your invention is the greatest Chinese invention in history. I am going to assign you one invention that the Song Dynasty created, and what you have to do is you have to convince the rest of us that that is indeed the most important and influential Chinese invention in history. So how does this work? There are 6 inventions, and you will randomly be assigned to one invention. You have to argue that invention. You don't have a choice, because realistically, if I said, okay, choose the invention and argue it, of course you would do a good job. Now, to know that you are a good arguer, a good debater, you are going to have to convince me that that invention is so important, even if you don't actually believe that. So you have to come up with as many valid reasons as to why your invention is the greatest Chinese invention in history. So then next week, what you are going to do is you're going to use your research that you do today to post a Flipgrid video arguing why your Chinese invention is the greatest invention in history. Then you watch one another's and say, okay, what is the best one? Then, as a class, we are going to have a final vote when we meet together next week. Okay? Who wins? Which invention is the most important? So, let me introduce you to the big 6. Here are the inventions. Now, if your last name begins with the letter A, B, C, or D, you are going to try and convince me that the compass is the most important Chinese invention of all time. If your last name begins with E, F, G, H, or I, you must convince me that bridges are the most important Chinese invention in history. Now, if your last name starts with J, K, L, M, you must convince me that paper is the most important Chinese invention. If your last name starts with NOPQ, you must convince me that printing is the most important Chinese invention. If your last name starts with RSTU, you must convince me that gunpowder is the most important Chinese invention. And finally, if your last name is V, W, X, Y, or Z, that was really hard for me to figure out which letter came after V, you will be researching this invention called smallpox inoculation. This is essentially a vaccine that got rid of smallpox, which is a horrible disease. Have fun looking at pictures of that. Now, it is time for you kids to get to work, which brings me to the only slide that you need to change in this entire presentation. Slide number 15. You see all those little green things here? What you are responsible for doing is you are going to edit those green things. This is going to be important because this is essentially the script that you are going to use for your Flipgrid. Let me explain. In my opinion, smallpox inoculation is the greatest invention in Chinese history. One reason why smallpox inoculation is so important is blah, 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 blah. Another reason why smallpox inoculation changed the world is blah, 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 blah. Finally, the biggest reason why smallpox inoculation is the most important Chinese invention is blah, 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 blah. That third one should be a very good argument. Therefore, it is clear that smallpox inoculation is the most important Chinese invention, blah, 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 blah. You're done. Once you are done editing slide 15, you are done for today. And remember, slide 15 is going to be very important for your Flipgrid video next week. Enjoy your weekends, kids. I love you all.